The question is, do you think in the time that you've been training people that we're getting better at coming up with that, clarifying our vision of where we're going and actually having the discipline to apply it and live to it?
Great question. I believe we are getting better at our visions. In fact, I don't think you're going to go anywhere unless you have clear goals, clear vision, understand where you're going and your why. I've seen many, many people, probably in the thousands, start down this track over the last 30-odd years and crash and burn or stop. And generally, the reason they stop is not clear enough in the why. And, you know, you'll get people think that we'll just get into regen ag because we're going to make more money out of it. I think your heart's got to be in it. And if your heart's not there, then you won't keep it up. So certainly, and I think the awareness of that, I found in probably the last 5 years, the awareness of that need to understand your why has really picked up.
And Peter, have you thought of putting a why on the on Maya grazing? So when the dashboard comes off, have you refined your why?
Is this on?
Yeah, use Terry's. You're close enough.
Speak loud.
Yeah. Okay, speak up, speak up.
I take your point, but I kind of wanted to pick up on, I think Terry kind of undersells.
See if it can work.
Hey.
Right.
I think Terry kind of undersells what he does here because, to my mind, yes, we need to have a why, we need to have a purpose, and that's what's going to keep us moving. But to be truly sustainable, there does need to be some kind of economic incentive. And the whole point about the teachings of you know, Terry and, you know, all the other people in this room is that there is an economic incentive in the long term. It's all about long-term profitability and doing things that are going to increase not just the short-term profitability of your land, but also building the soil and the natural capital so that you get longer-term profitability. And ultimately, if we can't show that there's some kind of economic return on what we're doing, then we're not really providing the right incentives going forward. And so I think it's really important that the teachings also are able to deliver on us being able to have long-term viable organisations with long-term profit. And you know, yes, there needs to be a why in terms of the bigger picture and, you know, improving the world. But at the end of the day, you've got to put your kids through school and you've got to eat. And so we do need to provide those economic incentives. And so carbon markets, for example, is a great example of a mechanism that can help us to sort of value on the other things that we're doing in terms of the broader issue of natural capital. Anyway, just a...
Walter, you had a thought?
Yeah, look, I'd just like to pick up on that. Charles Massey, when he was doing his PhD, you know, and we worked very closely with him, got some really stunning figures. There's about 100,000 farmers left in Australia, right? They're going down. And basically, of those, yeah, there may be 5,000 people that are doing it because of passion, because that's what their innovative passion leadership is. But there's another 15,000 out of those 100 who've actually invested in change. They've gone to courses, they've done the research, they've done, you know, they're aware. By all means, they're very aware, very interested. But up to now, they've been looking for certainty or at least some confidence from the political process. Do we have the environment? Do we have the, you know, the certainty, the confidence to make that investment? Because the investment is sometimes significant. And I think what's changed in the last couple of years, actually quite profound, is firstly, they're seeing the whole natural capital value of what they're doing is very important and starting to put those metrics into their equation. Secondly, they're seeing resilience as a key part. Are they still getting yields, as we heard, 4 years out of 5, rather than basically crashing 3 years out of 5 and, of course, having the bank manager on their back? And I think it's that resilience in their buyer systems, not just yield, you know, short-term financial return, but it's actually the last one standing. Are they going to be resilient and standing? And I think those strategic issues, especially now as the world is getting under more stress, and also with COVID as things have to relocalise, supply chain, food system, it's all about confidence relocalising. So I think they're now in a very much stronger position to make those investment decisions.
Thank you. We've got some questions. Michael, lead the way.
My question's to Walter. You talk about trees, rainfall, the relationships. Have you got and temperature? Have you got any sort of ballpark figures on what you might need? I mean, to influence rainfall.
Yeah, look, I mean, yes, the physics is very, very clear. Now, obviously, trees are powerful in transpiring. They've got a leaf area index tenfold of the surface area, so they're transpiring per hectare enormously. A forest will transpire up to 40,000 litres per hectare per day, that is. And basically, every gram of water that gets transpired has to have some 590 calories of heat energy to convert from liquid to gas to transpire. And of course, that gives you a very simple physical measure of how much cooling that transpiration is doing. And so, yeah, forests are very, very powerful in that cooling. In fact, the Earth's residual vegetation, and there's only about 50% of it left compared to 8,000 years ago, is doing at the moment some 24% of the incident solar radiation, taking it from the land surface back up into the upper atmosphere and then out to space. So we can do those sorts of calculations, no argument scientifically. What's more difficult is to say, yeah, if I plant this tree, how will that affect the thermometer in my veranda, right? And that's where it's a bit more complex. But in a sense, we live in Canberra, or I live in Canberra, others of us do, and we've had 100-year of urban forests, Marion Mahoney, Walter Burley Griffin establishing that habitat, and as we say, 12 degrees centigrade cooler on a hot 40 degrees day because of that forest. And the benefit of that is not just the temperature, but it's all about the heat stress and the whole health savings that would have across humanity, enormous.
Rachel.
Thank you. So Brian, I know that you're going to say go through your testing process, but my testing process is not really giving me the answer that I want. So, and Walter, I kind of know what you're going to say. So I'm going to ask Terry this question. So this is about the choice of burning over spraying and the other choices that we might have. I've got camphor laurels as my deadly weed that I have to deal with. I've got 4 hectares of camphor laurels that were mainly blitzed during the fire, but they're now revegetating and coming up exponentially. So I don't want to spray them, but I am prepared to bulldoze them down. Then what happens? So then I've got a lot of dead trees that I need to that I could get rid of by burning. Or I've got a lot of litter, dead litter lying around that maybe makes me vulnerable in a fire area. So, and I also I want to turn that grassland, I won't have cattle on the grassland. So what is the problem? And is there a problem with burning weeds of basically 4 hectares of camphor laurel weeds?
Thanks, Rachel, for that question. You guys are lucky, aren't you? Well, firstly, it comes back to your goals. What do you want to achieve on that piece of land and how fast do you want to achieve it? Being from Queensland, I don't mind using a bulldozer. But I think then what do you do with the timber? Mm-hmm. What do you do with it? So the first thing I would ask is there a use for it? Mm. Is there some way you can turn that into something useful, whether it's biochar, whether it's wood, whether it's furniture or whatever. That would be the first thing before you put a bulldozer into it. If you do decide to go down that track, well then I think the simplest way then is you actually just push it into windrows and get rid of it. And then
Get rid of it, burn it.
burn it, yeah. And I think fire is, as Alan's always said, fire is one of the tools that we have access to, and I think one of the mistakes we've made, and I've made this as well, is probably taken fire out of our system too much. The Australian ecosystem has evolved with fire, and I think we need to be careful about totally removing it. So I don't mind, but I think that what you've then got to do is what do you look at doing with that piece of land then, and what are your goals for it? And you obviously want to get that back under something that's going to draw down that carbon that you've just actually put it back into the atmosphere and try and get that country working again. And if you want to graze it, well then that's obviously some good quality biodiverse pastures.
Thank you. That was the answer I was looking for.
Thank you. All right, that means there's a bonfire party at Rachel's, right? Peter,
Can I just add some? Can I just add a quick comment? Yeah, I agree. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with fire. There's another business that I've found that specialises in doing what are called savanna burning projects up the top end of Australia, where they shift from late season hot fire burns to early season burns using sort of more traditional mosaic burning style techniques, and as a result they can measure the reduction in carbon emissions as a result of those early season fires. And we use that. We basically generate income that then goes and funds the Indigenous ranger programs up in the top end in Cape York and Arnhem Land, so that they can run these ranger programs according to traditional techniques. And there's a net benefit in terms of reduction in carbon out of doing that. So there's nothing fundamentally wrong with fire if it's used in the right way. They're also looking at applying those same principles now down further south as well, but it's still pretty early days.
Look, and it is wise management and it's balance, and you're in charge. And the other question is, what are you going to do with the root suckers as the camphor laurel comes back,
Over here.
Yeah, thank you, just generally because of the pointing to the exponential potential of farming this way. But I was struck by one thing you said, Terry, in regard to saying that consumers don't want to pay the price of food, the real price of food. I don't think that's actually true. I think what is happening is that they're not charged for it, and that's two very different things. One is a legislative sort of framework that it operates in. If we fail to charge the full cost of food production and continue to externalise those costs, people of course won't pay for it, but that's the legislative challenge that I think we have. So I think I've got much more faith in what I don't like to call as consumers, because they're farmers and participants just as much as you or I are. We all have a stake in this, and we need to be encouraged and positively encouraged through legislation. It's more of a comment really, but I'm just interested why you think people don't want to pay the full price of food.
First, I think traditionally we never have, but I think the market rules. We were talking at breakfast this morning and about the issues around meat and the attitudes to meat in the community generally. But my view was, if you wanted to halve meat consumption in Australia, you do what we've just done, you double the price of cattle, and that will have an impact on consumption. So I think while there's a 10%, there's the more affluent and educated end of society certainly will pay more for food. But I do believe there's another 70 or 80%, and I'm just picking those numbers out of the sky. I have no data around those numbers, but I do believe that there is still a significant majority of the community, not just in Australia but in most countries, that will buy on price. And I think, I used to go down to the supermarket and shop with my girls on weekends because it was about the only time I got to spend with them. But when you watch what people put in those baskets as they come out, 16 bottles of Coke and 5 packets of chips, and that was their meal for the day. Now those sort of people, and that's a lot of people shop like that. They're shopping out of the centre of the aisles, not around where the fresh food is. And so I still think we've got a way to go on it. And that's why I do believe, it's a great point that you make. We do have to start asking that price. But I think that the simpler way to get money back into agriculture is through the carbon mechanisms and natural capital mechanisms.
And we are working on, there's a lot of people working on natural capital accounting now to somehow understand the value of those externalities that you're talking about. A question in the middle.
Hi, thanks for today. It's been fantastic. Just wondering, you've spoken about ecology and trees and general information like that, but how do you think remnant vegetation actually fits in with the whole regenerative system, particularly in regards to if you need to take your farming enterprise out of remnant vegetation to progress its, to bring it back?
I'm going to direct that to you, Brian Welberg.
Thank you very much for the question. I suppose I'm guilty of saying...
Poke that microphone towards your mouth.
Thank you. Thank you. I really shy away from the whole concept of non-native because as a non-native, I shouldn't be answering this question, but it's really about building life, building productivity, building a future for yourself and your family. And whether it's an introduced species or a non-introduced species, how can we improve the biodiversity, the water flow, the energy flow, all of those things, and then the environment will support you. Who decrees whether it's a native or non-native? That's just a human invention. It's really about getting the energy back into that environment. And whether we do it through introduced species or not, I always say to you, you're all covered in non-natives. Every single one of you is covered in non-natives. Every single one of you gorged on non-natives at tea time. So to me, the idea behind non-natives is really neither here nor there. We certainly need to make sure they're still part of biodiversity at the end of the day. But I think as land managers, we need to focus on what we can really do, which is energy flow, community dynamics, mineral cycle. And if we can enhance those 4 processes, then I think what we perceive to be a problem with individual species, whether they're weeds, whatever it is, they will tend to disappear. They become less of an issue. And then we can deal with them as we see fit. But as long as that landscape is building in those 4 processes, you're going to have a good, happy family and a good community. So without getting into specifics, that's where I'd leave it.
All right. Martin?
G'day everybody. Terry, you mentioned nutrient density or bricks meter. What do you think about farmers getting paid for nutrient density of food?
I'd love for them to be paid for that, Martin. I think the tricky bit is actually measuring it and measuring it consistently. And I think once we get mobile phone apps where you can wander around the supermarket and basically test the near-infrared reading on your food and relate that back to a bricks level or a density food, nutrient density level, then I think we're on the right track. And I do think consumers will respond to that, at least that top 10, 15, 20% will. But I'd love to see that. And, it's a major human health issue, the quality of our food.
Can I just see David Farley over there, and being someone who's worked in, at this delivering food and the quality of food area, what do you think about that question, David? Can you maybe just whiz up here and hop in a chair?
It's a great question, and I think it's one that's doable. We have the ability to create, measure, and instruments that can establish value, and it really comes down to that unique word that's called fungible. Is it fungible, the result you get? Now, we do it with grains, and we do that at the silo. We do it with cotton from the cotton gin, and we do it with fleeces through the shearing shed. So I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that you'll be able to do it with nutrition. We already do it in guiding capital at the moment through our social welfare system, where we've issued, instead of issuing cash, we're issuing digitised money via a card that only allows certain items to be purchased on it, which are nutritional items generally not tobacco items or alcoholic items and things like that. So the world is going that way, and I don't think it'll be too long before we get there. But more importantly, if you look at the size of the prize, and I tried to give an idea of the size of the prize when I presented there, that obesity is circa $2 trillion annually. So if you looked at capital and said, where would that capital be better deployed, and how do we get that capital out of the cost of health of obesity and put it into something else, it's through developing instruments like you've just spoken of. So I believe it's achievable, yes.
Thank you.
Hi there. Firstly, thank you to all of you. It's been fantastic to hear you all speak. I guess I'm just trying to continue the conversation that my new friend, Grant, started, and my soon-to-be new friend over here has started. I come from the consumer messaging side of things, sales strategy, and I'm such a fan of yours, Terry, and I feel so embarrassed that I'm about to say that. There's something that you're wrong about. And it's that top 10 to 15%. That's what has been the baseline, but things are really rapidly changing. Millennials are our biggest consumer group, and food is becoming more of a priority than it's ever been before. And over the last 5 years, I've been in the US running an ag startup, and I've spent more time in grocery stores than I care to admit and observing consumer behaviour. We can't expect people to pay for a product that they don't know exists and they can't stand the messaging on. We have people in our own industry that are struggling to grasp the concept of regenerative agriculture. Consumers now all the time, natural raised beef, free range, hormone free, local, but how local? It's already quite opaque. So regenerative agriculture is in this really exciting space where we have this opportunity to define what we are, and that I know that's a dangerous space that Lorraine was talking about before. The thing is, if we don't define ourselves, someone else is going to do it for us. We lose that control. All of a sudden, we're a non-trusted organic shoot off, and we all know it's too precious to let that happen. So it's really just to raise that there's more, that hope, that feeling of hope. Consumers want this product. There will be a line around the corner. We just have to tell them what it actually is and do it really clearly.
That's a good point.
Thank you. I'd always love to be corrected.
Tig.
Yeah, hi. This is another thing that I'd like to say that you're wrong about, Terry. Seems you love it so much. Anyway, this is my opinion.
Is there a question in it, Tig?
There is, and I'll get to it very quickly if I can, Rebecca. Basically, fire, the Australian landscape has not evolved through fire. The Australian landscape has regressed through fire. And what we've created through fire is a dominance of sclerophyll, and that sclerophyll is existing with high biodiversity, but with low community dynamics and a failure for ongoing succession. And so what we've done is we've lost a lot of the high succession species that have now reverted to our gullies and our wetter areas that have more advanced xylems. Their leaf and their drop is consumable by animals or by soil microbes, so it doesn't build up as fuel. And much better temperature mitigators. So when you are specifying, Walter, you are specifying temperature of trees, there's a significant difference between standing underneath a canopy of lily-pilly or ficus or even blueberry ash than it is under a full canopy of eucalypt, for example. And I think that sort of needs to be put into the equation. And I think that we're yet to really understand the damage that fire can cause, even if it's done very well.
All right. Walter, yes, and then we'll just have the one question and then we'll be done.
Very, very quickly, you're absolutely right. If you go back sort of 10,000 years in the start of the post-glacial Holocene, it was a megafauna that were massive browsers, And of course, they maintained a whole different organic biological cycle. And basically, we got all the pollen analysis that basically Central Australia, for example, was casuarina, calitris, Mitchell grass, and rainforest gallery forest. And of course, we converted that into effectively aridification, mulga and spinifex with the loss of the megafauna. And of course, then indigenous land management had to rapidly and very skillfully adapt mosaic burning to stop actually the broadcast barbecue that the fires would have caused. So yes, we've had about, and the pollen analysis, the charcoal analysis shows clearly there was a major flip 8,000 years ago when we went into these sclerophyll vegetations, a fire-prone environment. And of course, yeah, we're just hanging on there. There's no reason why we can't go back into a herbivore-dominated nutrient cycling process, and that's through actually ecological grazing strategies.
I just, Teague, I'm always happy to stand corrected, but I'm not going to allow you to get away with that one.
All right.
Australia was a fire climax when the white people arrived here. And there was orders of magnitude less trees in the environment then than there are today. And New England tableland is a classic example where the pollen record shows that there were no eucalypts in that pollen record prior to white settlement, and within 20 years eucalypt pollen started to dominate the pollen record there. And our large areas of mulga, our large areas of brigalow, our large areas of eucalypts, I don't believe were here. And there's photo records that go back into the 1880s, 1890s that show landscape that's now fully timbered was open, 130, 140 years ago. So what we've done is we've actually removed fire and put in livestock. But we've moved away from a fire climax, but we haven't managed it as a grazing climax. Now, when you're in the grazing business, you must manage it as a grazing climax. And that's the mistake we've made. But that's what we're starting to shift. I think pretty well everyone in this room would now be managing their grazing for a grazing climax and not a fire climax.
Thank you.
We can take that one offline, Tig.
Yep. Now, at the risk of getting into trouble, is it Courtney?
Yes.
Have you got a question that can be answered quickly?
I hope so, but I do hope that it continues over
Okay,
an afternoon.
we'll take it as a question on notice.
Okay, thanks. So I'm Courtney from Harris Farm Markets, and we are humbly here to learn from you all. And I thought you might find it funny, real quick, that during the panic buying that happened this time last year, from a grocery store point of view, the only products still left on the shelf were the plant-based proteins. So none of the vegan food was touched. Everything else was gone, even in a panic buying situation. So we're here to communicate that there's better meat out there, there's better products out there, and we've now identified on-shelf regenerative products. And from a consumer point of view, we just launched that in February. So we're going to collect that data eagerly to share with you all if customers are shopping this way. But we need your help. So that's my question, is for us to convert our supply chain and to get more producers, makers, growers that are in the region space into our shops. I'd love your advice, and I know that's a big question.
Nope, we can't answer that one. Okay. I'll tell you why, because one of the next sessions after lunch is about investment in agriculture and the supply chain, so I think we can probably pick it up then. So I think we'd like to thank this great list of speakers. Brilliant.